with the Round Ball Australia podcast network for the Super Show on all things Asia Pacific football, the Final Frontier. I am your host, Matt Olsen, and here with producer Lockie as a bit of an opening to proceedings in what will be an insane week of football to come across really these AFC qualifying games. Obviously, as Australians, the Socceroos have their hopes on the line in Perth and Jeddah, but there's so much more going on throughout the continent. Lucky, I guess, to roll off you for a bit here to get things started. What are you most looking forward to in the next week or so?
Oh, that's such a tough question. Obviously, we're heading into this window where legacies are written, really, in terms of World Cup qualifying. It's this window, the final two games of the third phase. Majority of the teams that are qualifying from Asia for the World Cup are going to do it in this window. So these are the times where we get those stories. Obviously, as an Australian, I'm looking straight for the Socceroos. I have a quite narrow field of view in that respect. Obviously, through our conversations, I've learnt a little bit more about the broadness of what else is going on, and we'll talk about Graham Arnold and his role in it all a little bit later. But that night in Perth has potential to be another really momentous occasion in Australian football. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, and it's not just the night itself and the man and the man of the moment, that these World Cup scenarios have become so synonymous for. It's actually the potential of, Bahrain taking points off Saudi Arabia, and then us at home here in Perth really having quite a wild night going into the morning. And I can tell you pubs and venues have said they will open up, 2-3 in the morning for that Bahrain fixture, just in case they take those points off Saudi and our ticket is booked, the night after we've all just been out watching that Socceroos Japan game. And that is very exciting. But I also feel it kind of is a bit of an anticlimax as well. So that's a situation. Anyway, I think the bias should probably stop there. On today's show, we have Western Asian expert, also from the Asian football show, Erfan Hosseini. Talk a little bit about his upbringing in Dubai and what football in the Arab and Western Asian world is like, and then also his love for Istiklal. He is an Iranian. I guess a second generation Iranian citizen to the UAE, I believe. So, yeah, very, very big moments for him with the UAE on the verge of an upset against Uzbekistan, which we talk about a lot. And an Iranian perspective on how their team is going. Obviously, their golden generation is coming to an end, and 2026 will be the end of that cycle. Obviously, also, as Lockie, you've mentioned there, Iraq and Jordan in, an insane scenario out of Group B. And now that Graham Arnold appointment is just so intriguing. So looking forward to, definitely hearing our thoughts on it, I think. But also just seeing the whole situation play out and the knowledge that 2 Australians could be managing at a FIFA World Cup, which is an insane situation for the game. And then also look at all things across the OFC and AFC, and a special, obviously, Socceroos and Australia tribute. I'll be honest, I brought over my old friend Cody who we've recorded a lot of specific, iconic Australian moments together. The 2023 World Cup, making the round of 16, and it's funny because I think the chat is just 105% vibes. Like, it's just off the scale, both of us just talking about scenarios and things. So hopefully it's a really good listen. But yes, just to get stuck into some items, I wanted to really just touch on what's happened for me personally, because obviously I've taken a bit of time away from the game, as you know, Lockie, and it's been a really big moment for me personally, dealing with things that happen in life and things that have happened in the past. And I've just been so thankful with the way the football community has really embraced me in that moment and in that time. And I told everyone, a lot of journalists and a lot of the clubs as well, that I was stepping away, and a lot of people at Perth Glory were still there for me and still invited me out to the end of the season function, and everyone got around me and we had a drink or two, and it was just a really, really nice moment. So I'm thankful to the football community while I'm kind of dealing with that. But obviously it is what it is. Don't want to touch on it too much. I do want to touch on football matters.
I will say, Matt, just before you continue on, we were thinking when we had this conversation and you made the decision just to step away from a little bit, and we were thinking, All right. Well, what can we do to kind of kick on the final frontier while he's in his absence? And we just ended up coming to the conclusion, there's no way we can do it without you. You're the guy with all the passion and the knowledge here. So we're glad that you took the time to be able to say you needed a break, and we're very glad to have you back as well.
Yeah, for sure. I will say within that break, there was one or two moments where I really got the inkling of kind of wanting to be back and jump on Twitter and Instagram and whatever, and really start talking about the game again. And one of those moments came in the most unlikely of places. So I wanted to give this a shout out, because I just feel like, especially in the Western world, there's not going to be anyone talking about this. But the AFC Challenge League, right? So obviously we've got our three tiers. The Champions League Elite, obviously, there was a really intense race with Kawasaki making the final. Obviously, Al Ahly and Riyad Mahrez have won the title, which is, it's a sign of the times, I think. The ACL2, need to say any more, obviously the fairy tale of having a Singaporean finalist, but then Sydney falling at the last hurdle when they really shouldn't have, and Hiroshima, who should have won the whole tournament, basically having the situation with Valerie Germain. I don't know if you have one or two things to say on that before I kind of move on.
I just think it's astounding. Obviously, the way Germain left the A-League was just in a cloud of furor, and people weren't happy, and the amount of finger pointing and kind of nose pulling that went on when they realised he was the reason that Sydney got to continue on through the competition as deep as they did was quite funny. Really disappointing for Hiroshima and their fans, and it's at the end of the day, it's a clerical error that they've made a mistake of, and it's cost them a really good chance at a continental crown. So as much as we're laughing about it, I'm sure the fans of the football club are quite upset, because that's a big opportunity blown.
Yeah, and obviously it didn't become a laughing matter for most teams in East Asia pretty quickly, because Sydney's fallen to Lion City Sailors, who, they've had this incredible moment getting a continental final in Singapore of all places. Just incredible, right? But it also paved the window for this whole dynamic with the UAE's national team, where the coach that's just won the title with Sharjah has been appointed as their national team manager. So it's a pretty incredible set of circumstances where the dominoes just fell from, Hiroshima, Germain, the A-League in Sydney, an underdog getting to host the final, and then, this burst of passion from the Sharjah club. And of course, if anyone knows the Sharjah Sports Club well, they'll know it's actually very famous for its cricket ground. Its cricket ground is, it's hosted the most one-day internationals in all of world cricket. So very, very interesting. But anyway, I wanted to come back to the Challenge League, right? Because the Challenge League had this very, very unique situation going on, where one of the favourites out of the Western bracket is Arkadag from Turkmenistan. If you know anything about the political climate of Turkmenistan, it is obviously an authoritarian state, and the leader there essentially founded this club to essentially be corrupt to the high heavens, and basically have an entire league made for Arkadag and the Turkmeni national team to come together and basically play 30 whatever practice games. and the whole story with Arkadag was, now that they've actually won their league and they're going to qualify for this new AFC competition that's being made for emerging nations, how is a team from Turkmenistan going to go when the games aren't fixed for them? Well, we can all comfortably sit here and say they went on to become continental champions, because of course they did. And it's one of those things that just really, really, I think, encapsulates the beauty of football and the beauty of its globalization. But this was also true on the eastern side of the bracket, because the Cambodian side that made it, Svay Riang, look at the footage of the final. They packed out their national stadium, 70,000 people there, and you're thinking this could be mistaken for being in, the Stade de France. It was just
cool.
Absolutely insane. Yeah, to see that from such an emerging nation, I don't think most people, even in countries like Thailand or Vietnam, would be that familiar with Cambodian football. And the scenes that it produced, and I feel really bad that Arkadag ended up winning in the end, because I feel like Cambodian football deserved to have its moment. But yeah, anyway, the continental compositions really, really delivered in 24-25, and I'm glad, because their expansion had been a really, really hot topic among, the rise of the Saudi League and everything else, but they delivered. They really, really did deliver. Yep. Elsewhere internationally, I think it's also worth touching on Oceania's finals as well. New Caledonia have really flexed their muscles, and I was in a lot of international football spaces trying to kind of get around Tahiti, because I feel like Tahiti as a country. Their football's really, really improved on a domestic front in particular, where they've been going toe-to-toe with French teams in the French Cup, and they've been winning games. So I was really, really impressed with AS Dragon, and World Cup performances that we've seen from AS Pire recently. I thought Tahiti are actually a bit of a smoky. It didn't really turn out that way. The game in Wellington, they got absolutely smoked, and one thing led to another in New Caledonia. With Jacob Jano and all these guys that have come out of the French system. Of course, they were no match for New Zealand. So absolutely beautiful to see the All Whites back. A lot of comments now with kind of Costa Barbarousas, Chris Wood. It will be their last ever chance to make their mark internationally, and to know they were all teenage boys, basically in that 2010 squad, to now be here in their 30s, absolutely incredible story, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I managed to catch the final between New Cal and New Zealand, and it must be said, just by the nature of a qualification phase like this being knockout football, it's not like in Asia where we have these group phases and you have a little bit of margin for error. Obviously, New Zealand were always going to be the favourites to go through. But as soon as you bring something as important as World Cup qualification down to a single 90-minute game of football, anything can happen, right? And Newcastle managed to keep a clean sheet in the first half. They had almost nothing going forward, but it was just kind of that kind of tension of, well, if they just hold on a little bit longer, then, a penalty shootout, anything could happen. But good for them. They get to go through, of course, to the playoff tournament as well, which is a new feature in World Cup qualifications. So they've still got a little bit of a chance. But yeah, New Zealand, obviously, with the expansion of qualification and the World Cup, they were looking at that spot and they knew it was theirs to lose. And especially for someone like a Chris Wood, who you mentioned, who's had his career best season in the Premier League, narrowly missed out on Champions League qualification with Nottingham Forest. Really, really cool for him. So obviously someone like him and Costa, as you mentioned, licking their lips. Obviously, with Auckland FC and everything they're going through, there's a big wave of momentum through New Zealand football at the moment. So yeah, I'm really keen to see what they can do in the international stage of the World Cup.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And I'm not finished on the Tahiti rant, by the way, because the Beach Soccer World Cup happened in the Seychelles, which that just deserves commentary on its own. The Seychelles hosted a FIFA international event, which is incredible, with their isolation in smack bang in the middle of the Indian Ocean. But the sad story is most of Asia failed at the tournament. Oman were nowhere to be found. Iran disappointed. Japan, I think Japan made the knockouts, but they usually do at these tournaments. And the biggest disappointment was former World Cup hosts, a team that's been number one in the world rankings, a team that's been to a World Cup final in Tahiti, and they lost 3 straight games. I don't even know where to begin with that. The scale of it must have just been a real gut punch, because some of those executives, some of the players play both codes, right? Like it's a really, really, really big deal for the islands in French Polynesia. And for them to have been knocked out and then a month later flown from the Pacific into the Indian Ocean to the Seychelles, a location where they would have felt perfectly at home. And it was just a disaster. The Senegal game in particular was really, really disappointing. So I really thoughts to everyone in Papiti and across the islands, because they could have easily been going to those intercontinental playoffs. And to not only have that taken away from them, but their own pride and joy in the beach soccer team failing, it must have been really, really difficult. For sure. So I know you have next to nothing to say on that.
Bro, no. I admire the passion. Look, I love the idea of beach soccer. I love that it, from what the highlights I see is 50% flicking up and self-volleying for the highlight reel. I love that. A very entertaining game, but yeah.
No, that's all good. Just to kick it up a gear, back on home soil, the draw for the 2026 Women's Asian Cup and all of those qualifying games have now been drawn out since we last, I think, kind of spoke about this. And I don't know if you've had a chance to look at any of the groups or anything, but that draw date has been confirmed for the 29th of July, which is significant because it's my birthday. So I know what I'll be doing that day, checking out, all of those qualified teams. I think most of the groups are straightforward. The only one that's speaking out to me right now is Vietnam's group, because out of Vietnam's group we have The UAE, who are really an emerging force, mostly through their domestic football. Obviously, we've just had the Women's Champions League final where Melbourne City played Wuhan in China. One of the biggest teams out of that draw was the Abu Dhabi Country Club, whose women's program, I imagine, is going to fuel the most of that UAE team. And Vietnam, for me, they really smack of a team that's there for the taking. I don't think the team that we see in 26 will be anywhere near as good as the side that we saw at the 2023 World Cup. And even then, they were drawn with, the USA, Netherlands and Portugal. It wasn't really much of a show in New Zealand at the time. The biggest team in that group, though, is Guam. And I'm deadly serious. The island of Guam could be going to an Asian Cup. Their women's team as well is really kicking on. In the same vein that the Philippines mostly got collegiate players out of the US, Guam is obviously an American territory, so you can bet collegiate players and anyone with a military association, they will be chomping at the bit to take points off Vietnam and the UAE. I'm deadly serious. We could be seeing Guam, of all countries, playing at the Asian Cup. I wish I kind of had more substance and commentary on it, but we're a bit short on time, and honestly,
they have got a 4-team group, I will say, because obviously with these qualifications, some are 5, some are 4, so a slightly easier draw.
Yes, no, exactly. And I think that was the one that really spoke out to me. I think as far as most of the ASEAN teams, other ASEAN teams are concerned, their draws are fairly straightforward. I want to say that Iran will have a pretty straightforward draw as well. So most of the regular customers that we expect. I know that Jordan hosted the tournament in 2018. So if we see something from the Jordanian team, I wouldn't really be surprised. Outside of that, though, I think we've just got to let those months kind of kick into gear. And by the time it comes over the next couple months, then we'll obviously have everything lined up to then kick on for the tournament. The Women's Futsal Asian Cup also happened, and that is worth noting. Because it was obviously the first edition since FIFA kind of codified women's futsal. The campaign really out of nowhere was quite miserable for Australia. A side that went 4 from 4 in qualifying. They really, really struggled out of what was the easiest group as well. China obviously were a much stronger team than people anticipated. The regular customers though, Thailand, Japan, Iran, I think that all went about as expected, but from an Australian perspective, left a lot to be desired, and I don't know if futsal again is something you head around too well, Lockie, but the FA, I can tell you privately, they really actually expected this team to kick on, and the fact they didn't it's a disappointment.
Yeah, that's a shame. Look, my role here on this show is just to act, as a vicarious insert from the audience, and if you did tune into the Asian Cup and haven't watched a lot of football like me, you would have been amazed about goalkeepers standing on the halfway line and playing the ball around Pep Guardiola style and kind of just disregarding their defensive responsibilities in the attacking phases. So that's my favourite part about futsal. Obviously disappointing for the Australians, but we know the technical nature that it can develop players in terms of a winter outdoor football sense. So as a sport, obviously it's something that FA is not sleeping on either, and it's a good thing for the development of all footballers.
And I can pretty comfortably say, in the same way that we had Tom Rogic come from a futsal background to making it as a legend of the Socceroos and Celtic, we've had players like Harry Stoll come from the Mariners program into the futsal program and vice versa. And I feel like for female players in particular, with how under-resourced some elements of the game still are in terms of the game professionalizing locally at least, I feel like being more of a full-time futsal player to helping, to kind of using futsal as a tool to really hone your game, I think that can really make a big part in some of these girls making their careers. And I hope they still are really par for the course, even though the campaign has failed. Last thing I wanted to touch on was the under-20s World Cup, because obviously Australia was crowned champions of Asia. Now, had I been around to do the program at the time, that would have been an absolute hoot, covering that tournament. But yes, the draw for the World Cup will take place, I believe, right at the end of June. So after all of the World Cup pandemonium has been sorted out. then the AFC's main focus will be sorting out those groups in Santiago in Chile, and obviously, sorry, I should also mention there's not just AFC representatives as well. The UFC also have New Zealand and New Caledonia at the tournament as well, and I can just all I'll say right now is we don't want to build expectations because we really haven't had a youth team go to a World Cup like this, in a while now at the men's level. So I don't think there's any expectations to harbour. I think it's all about just building that excitement. And then once the draw's out, we can kind of look at the quality of opposition, where some of the players are coming from. If they come from more, European and tested South American backgrounds, it's a whole other conversation. But just really, really excited to see where they go from there. That's all we have for the kind of miscellaneous agenda for now. So you'll be hearing from Erfan first, and Lockie, me and you will then come back to chat a bit about Graham Arnold and Iraq.
Sounds good.
Continuing on with all things AFC World Cup qualifying, I'm now with a West Asian expert, perhaps you can call him, coming to us from Dubai, but of course of Iranian origin. It is the Asian Football Show's Erfan Hosseini. Erfan, how are you today?
I'm doing very well, Matt. Thank you so much for inviting me on. Very honored to be here, and looking forward to this conversation with you.
Yeah, thanks so much. So I like, when I interview a lot of footballers in my line of work, and when I reach out to a lot of people like yourself, just from a very different background, I just love getting into football and what it means for you personally. So tell me a little bit about your upbringing and what it was like really, learning to love the game that we all partake in so strongly.
Yeah, I was born here in Dubai, fully Iranian though, of course, and football has always been a big part of me. Thanks to my father. Thanks to him, I'm a big supporter of Istiqlal, the Iranian club, as well as Team Melli, the Iranian national team. I have the jersey right behind me. And yeah, I mean, ever since I can remember, attending games, whether it's the UAE League games, whether it's AFC Champions League games when Iranian clubs come over here, it's just always been a big part of my personality. And, as I got older, I found the interest of writing about football, of talking about football. And I think football is what describes me the best.
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, I totally understand wanting to make, I think, football as a sport, knowing its bigger impact, knowing it is such a global sport, making it a big part of your personality and who you are. I think it's something that I can definitely combine with, and I'm, on the other side of the globe. So totally understand. But, you mentioned sort of being such a big, strong Team Melli fan, and again, probably domestically in the UAE, there's a lot of emotion there. So just with regards to how your father got you into the game, I mean, was it a lot of, you remember watching the Iranian national team a lot as a kid, or maybe even the UAE team? Was it that kind of connection where you just hit the ground running when you were like 4 or 5 years old, and it went from there?
It actually started from domestic football.
Yeah.
Like my first ever memories are of Istiqlal playing in the AFC Champions League. I remember one of the first games I ever attended was Iran versus Brazil in Abu Dhabi. It was a friendly game. Iran lost that game 3-0. I was very young. I was maybe like 4 or 5 years old only.
Yeah.
Then I also attended Istiqlal versus Al Shabab, which is also in Dubai. That was an AFC Champions League game back in 2013. So yeah, I just felt a lot connected to Iranian football ever since I was young. And it wasn't like that was forced on me or whatever. No, it was just, I was passionate about it, and it got me excited to watch my country play football.
Did you grow up with an understanding historically of because I know that obviously you were born in the 2000s, I understand, but there was a UAE team that played in the World Cup in the 90s, and of course a lot of famous Iranian teams in kind of the 60s and 70s. So I mean, did you ever grow up with an understanding of that? Is that something that you've grown up to really love and respect as you've got so strongly involved in the game?
As I was growing up, no, but recently, yeah, I've heard a lot more about those great Iranian teams back in the 70s, that managed to win 3 Asian Cups in a row. They had great players like Hassan Roshan, Ali Parveen, the legendary Nasser Hijazi, by the time of recording yesterday was actually his 14th 14th death anniversary. So rest in peace to him. He was one of the best goalkeepers Asia has ever seen. And for the UAE team that made the World Cup, obviously I wasn't born back then, but I've heard a lot about that 90s team. They were the only team, UAE team in history to make the World Cup. And back then, only two Asian teams would make the World Cup. So it's a really impressive achievement for them, actually. Even though they did lose all three games, but they did score 2 goals against one of them against West Germany, which I think in itself is a good achievement. And they also made the Asian Cup final in '96, which is still their only one to date. I have heard a lot about that '90s team, and a lot of people here talk about it.
So I guess talking a little bit about the culture of West Asian football. I mean, you mentioned the domestic influence being really big. Now, I recall watching, the ACL2 this season, where there was the big Shabab Al Ahly, famous Dubai club, fixture with Sharjah. Now, what I know of the geography of the UAE, obviously a lot of, rivalry between the Emirates. My personal understanding of it probably comes from a cricket background as well, where Sharjah, has been a really famous cricket stadium. I've always known that there was that bit of an edge, but to see how parochial the fans were, I mean, that was a really, really special game for the community. And I also reflect on you, saying that you're an Istiklal fan. And look, I'm obviously a Westerner, so I can only read about these things, but understanding the Tehran Derby, I mean, for me, it is probably one of the best rivalries in the world. I mean, it is absolutely massive. And the history of the teams, and obviously the way that, politically Iran's been a very polarizing country, but I think the way that no matter who's in charge or what's going on, dating back to that sort of 50s, 60s, 70s period, these two clubs have always been at the heart of Iranian sport. And I just think it's such an incredible thing. So certainly when you were young watching Istiklal, whenever it was derby time, I mean, what was that like?
Wow, I think it's still the feeling hasn't changed to this day. I mean, you might not feel stressed like the day before it, but once match day kicks in and you wake up that morning, you're like, oh my God, it's derby day. We can't lose this. It might be like this in other countries as well, but you have family members who are press police fans, and if you lose, you're getting a hard time with them, and they're gonna be calling you on stuff and trying to annoy you. But yeah, the derby itself, I mean. I haven't had the honor to attend a game derby at the Azad Stadium yet. Hopefully that will change soon. But yeah, it's a very historical derby. Dating back pre-revolution times as well, and then now as well. Persepolis recently have had the upper hand with the league titles. Istiklal obviously more successful and continental-wise, having won 2 Asian Champions League titles. But yeah, I mean, it's a very heated rivalry, and it's not only that game. I mean, Persepolis versus Traktor this season also has been absolutely crazy. I mean, in both the games in Tabriz and Tehran this season, you've had crazy fights. Amazing attendances, obviously, but yeah, crazy fights. There was even a case of the fans throwing rocks, and I think unfortunately one of the Persepolis fans got blind, which is sad to see. And I think it all started at the beginning of the season because Traktor snatched up 3 of Persepolis' starters, that's really made the Persepolis fans angry. And then I would say that the Persepolis Traktor rivalry right now, or this season at least, has been even more heated than the Istiklal Persepolis rivalry. That's how bad it's gotten this season.
Yeah, I mean, look, I didn't necessarily want to touch on obviously the fan violence and things like that, but obviously it is an outcome sometimes with these types of things, and look, Iran's historically been no exception to that. But look, that's a whole other conversation. I was actually going to jump straight into World Cup qualifying, but I did actually have one more thing for you. Now, again, I understand your age might play a little bit of a part in this, but. As an Australian, I was actually, I've been on certain media appearances in kind of the online internet international football space, and I was talking with Jack from Deadball TV. I'm not sure if you're familiar with his channel, but I was explaining to him who I consider Australia's 5 main rivals to be, and I've quite comfortably put Iran on that list because of the qualifying playoff between Australia and Iran in 1998. Now, the Australian perspective on this, and again, I'm even a bit young, and I know you're certainly too young to, well, you weren't even born, right? For me, it's just such a really big deal that the playoff happened in the fashion that it did. The Iranian coach, there's footage of the Iranian coach coming out after the game basically saying Australia should have gone to France to go to the World Cup. I mean, it was an absolute steal. And Australia just completely lost their heads and had a few famous, crowd incidents that night and things. But what really makes the rivalry special is the fact that is still the last competitive fixture Iran and Australia have played together at senior level. That was the year I was born. So I am going to turn, 27 this year. Australia's come from the OFC into the AFC. We've still never had a competitive fixture. I mean, it's quite an incredible statistic. And I've always wanted to know what the Iranian view on this is. So I'm just curious if it resonates with you at all.
Yeah, I still find it crazy as well how it's been almost 2 decades now and Iran still hasn't played Australia in a competitive fixture. And no, I really want to see that game. I mean, I haven't seen Iran play Australia ever in my lifetime. Mm-hmm. And yeah, like you mentioned, that was their last competitive fixture. I think they played a friendly after it as well. I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that 98 qualifying game was. I mean, it's always talked about in Iran. Like I was speaking to my dad about it, and he was saying, they were sitting in his village back home. And then, when that second goal went in by Khodadad Azizi, everyone, like, you could literally feel an earthquake. He said it was that bad. Like, the whole country started shaking and celebrating. But yeah, he still says that was one of the best days of his life. And, from what I've seen and from what I've read, I think that might genuinely be the single greatest moment in Iranian football history. I know we won 3 Asian Cups. I know we've qualified for more World Cups, but it was a hard time for the people then, coming off not long after the war as well, the Iran-Iraq war, and then to make the World Cup in that fashion. Australia were a great team back then, and they had players playing over in England, they had players in overseas, and Iran's team was good as well. I mean, they had the legendary Ali Day, Khodadad Azizi, who won Asian Player of the Year. And the Abenzada as well, a legendary goalkeeper. But yeah, I mean, playing away in Australia like that, I think there was a moment where a Jimmy jump, which is a pitch invader, that's what they call him in Iran. Pitch invader entered the pitch, and then the game stopped for like 10-15 minutes, was it? Yeah. And then that changed the whole game for Iranians. Like that's the moment that Iranians believe that God was on their side, and he managed to win that game.
Yeah, look, I'll move on. Not really anything to say about it from my end. But listen, I just in a modern context, I just feel like the peak Carlos Queiroz version of Iran. Defensively, they were so solid, and to have pictured a world where in that kind of mid-2010s window, Ange Postecoglou's Australia playing against Carlos Queiroz's Iran, that would have been one of the great games that we were totally denied. Yes, we absolutely should have. But let's look. I did want to jump straight into Group A and really talk about Iran and Uzbekistan's, perceived dominance in the group, but I'm kind of going through the table now and having a look at this. Okay, Iran's qualified for the World Cup. Uzbekistan only 4 points ahead of the UAE. I mean, this has been really, really comfortable, but something has kind of stopped it from being, or at least seeming as dominant as what Japan's done in Group C, for example. So what do you think the main viewpoint in Iran is of how the team have gone in the cycle, and what can the team look towards in 2026, knowing full well that a golden generation of players is probably reaching the end of a long cycle together, dating back to when Queiroz was first appointed?
Yeah, I think there's not really much trust right now in Amir Khalenoui, even though he has been getting the results. But people are disappointed with the implementation of youngsters into the team and the squad selections. Because this golden generation, as I said, it's going towards the end. It's not going to last us for so long. Maybe at most the Asian Cup after the World Cup. But yeah, I mean the expectations in itself for Iran, it's always been to make the knockouts before. But I think now with the expansion of the World Cup to 48 teams, I think even making the knockouts isn't enough. The goal previously was to make the last 16. I think it still should be to make the last 16. And I think that's very much possible. Depending on the draw and all, of course. But yeah, the golden generation. I mean, I think the golden generation aligns a lot with Carlos Queiroz, because he was an ambassador for the national team. He was not only a coach, he helped players move over to Europe. He brought over dual nationals from, Salman Khodus is still playing for the national team today. Hushain, he played in Sydney FC. I'm pretty sure he won them. Yeah, he scored a winning penalty kick against Perth, I think it was. Yeah, I probably should remind that. But I think that the expectations for sure should be to make the last 16 for Euro.
Yeah. Okay. So, but the World Cup cycle and the performance right now. Again, just because the younger players and the rotation, I've seen a lot of Iranians say that there's been issues in those departments. So when you're balancing, trying to actually make the team better for the future with maintaining that high level of performance, as a kind of highly rated team in Asia, is it a case of you look at the team quite negatively? Do you look at them positively and realistically, I mean, you're saying that round of 16 is still the goal. So, there's still a lot of faith in the players that are there, but it won't really remain that way for much longer.
Yeah. And you mentioned the balancing. The Iranians don't want necessarily for the coach to start all these young players. It's more of a case of even benching them and, when we're winning games, when, the game is going smoothly in favor for us. I think just bringing them on, giving them the chance. But for example, last window, we had, I think, 3 players under the age of 21 get called up to the national team. But they didn't even make the bench for either of the games. So a lot of people said this on Iranian social media. They were basically just, they got VIP tickets to come watch the games for the Iranian national team, basically. But I mean, trusting the more experienced players. When you come to this stage of World Cup qualifiers towards the end, the World Cup is getting close. I can't really blame the coach for wanting to use the more experienced players. But the problem is even the more experienced players aren't playing very well right now. The defense especially, there's been some issues over there.
Yeah. So putting your Emirati hat on now, because I know that again. Things might be quite polarizing for Iran, but ultimately they have still made it, and there will be a future that they can kind of work towards, hopefully off the back of a good performance in North America. With the UAE, I feel like they're a team that really suits the playoff format, and I've seen people from all over the globe, people in the Americas, people in Europe, saying that a team that they really think could be a bit of a force in that playoff system outside of maybe Nigeria, Venezuela, is in fact the UAE out of Asia, because they're in the playoffs, in the 2022 cycle where they obviously lost to the Socceroos. But with this cycle now, it's so much more forgiving, and they're a team that really hasn't performed all that bad, all things considered. I think the 5-0 win against Qatar for me really kind of woke up the fact that maybe they haven't been performing as poorly. But I do also reflect on the fact that they're relying on a lot of naturalized players still. There's a lot in the squad that I think could be improved. The coaching problem really hasn't been solved, I don't think. And the Asian Cup was a disaster. I mean, the Asian Cup was really, really bad from a UAE perspective. So knowing that they have performed so strongly in Group A, could they actually meet the expectation of gaining another automatic spot when going through to the next round? And in fact, actually, let me rephrase this differently. Because they're playing Uzbekistan on match day 9, could they actually get the second automatic spot and potentially knock out Uzbekistan?
Yeah, I'll actually be there for that game. So looking forward to going there. But I mean, UAE they brought in a new coach. They brought in Kazim Alaria, who's the manager, current manager of Sharjah FC. You know, after the league season ends, and in a few days he will be joining the UAE national team. You know, he won the AFC Champions League 2 recently with them as well. He's a very experienced manager. He knows the league very well. He knows the players, and I think it's a good choice to bring him in. And for the Uzbekistan game, yeah, that's going to be a very big game. And I think UAE, they had their last minute winner versus North Korea last time out. I think that was very crucial for this, because if it wasn't for that, then Uzbekistan would be basically guaranteed a spot at the World Cup. But if they manage to win that game versus Uzbekistan, which with the quality that they have, I think they really can. With the hosting advantage as well. They're playing at the same stadium where they beat Qatar 5-0. I really think they can beat Uzbekistan if they show up. And with Qatar playing Uzbekistan in that last match day, if Uzbekistan drop points there as well, UAE can for sure get the last automatic spot.
But I mean, again, just to touch on some of the negatives, though, because, yeah, I realize that it actually is a huge window of opportunity. Match day 10, Uzbekistan play Qatar, which we'll touch on Qatar in a second. But going away to Kyrgyzstan, I imagine it's going to be up in the air, and it'll really depend on that strong performance. But by all means, while we're having this conversation, the UAE really are in that position. What do you think has changed since the kind of disastrous Asian Cup campaign to put them in that window where they can potentially sweep second spot?
I think that the the naturalization of players have it's not been 100% success, but it's still helped out. You've had players like Meloni, Fabio Lima come in, and they've helped out a lot with the national team. And yeah, that Asian Cup was a complete disaster class for the UAE. I mean, people were calling for the head coach to be sacked, for players to leave the national team, and some of the more experienced players actually never came back after the Asian Cup. So I think maybe the implementation of younger players into the national team, Sultan Adel, who scored 2 goals at the Asian Cup, I believe, he is also he hasn't been playing much domestically for the club, but he's one of those national team type of players that shows up when his country needs them. And yeah, after an injury, he's back now. He scored in the league a few days ago as well. I think that if he is on form, then the UAE as well will probably be on form as well.
And, it's interesting because I think a lot of the attention has rightfully been put on Uzbekistan. And I think that with the talent they've got, the moves that their players have been making, globally as well, I think it's a really, really big deal. They do deserve the plaudits. But I do really realize, talking to you as someone based in Dubai, that opportunity's there. And, I don't want to sit here and imply that it kind of will happen. And I think Uzbekistan deserve a lot of plaudits in their own right. But I have half a mind to the situation in Group A. I do briefly also want to move over to Group B, but before I do that, I also just want to touch on this whole situation with Qatar being absolutely the strongest that they could possibly look at an Asian Cup, and the World Cup qualifying performance. Total contrast. That game, I don't know if you were there in person, the UAE game where they had that massive loss. But again, I can't even really put my finger on it, knowing that the strong forward line they've got with the likes of Afif and Anwar Ali, and the comments on some of those naturalised players and the way they've been performing. I know Mendes, the centre back, has been in really, really poor form. What do you really put the answer towards a lot of those problems down to? Because for me, I think with the UAE, the problems are a bit more up to question, and you can see where their good form is going. For Qatar, it's just a total mystery how they've ended up conceding as many goals as they have, and how they've ended up looking so poorly.
Yeah, I mean, they've conceded 21 goals in 8 games. That's the worst across all the 18 teams who are present in this round, and I think that's probably one of the main issues they have right now. even at the Asian Cup, yeah, they won the Asian Cup, but their defense was still very shaky. I mean, their attack saved them a lot. They had no clean sheets in the knockout rounds, opposite of the last Asian Cup, where the only goal they conceded came in the final against Japan. So yeah, I think their defense, like you said, Mendes has not really been on the best of forms. He got sent off in their last game as well.
Yep.
And the whole naturalization thing hasn't been working for them as much as the UAE, I think. Edmondson Jr., he's an amazing player. I mean, you might have seen his performances with Al-Duhail at the Asian Champions League. They're a great player, but he just hasn't clicked yet for Qatar. Same goes with a lot of the other players. With the new head coach coming in, Lopetegui, we'll see if he'll be able to fix that defensive issue. I think it's... I don't think, because he needs to get familiar with the whole Qatari football, and it's going to take a while. But yeah, I think their defense is what's been costing them a lot.
And I just come back to them playing Uzbekistan in that final day. If Uzbekistan are off the back of a loss to the UAE, and Qatar are facing Iran in the first game, which I've kind of marked off as a bit of what we call in kind of English terms a dead rubber, where I don't really think it'll be a relevant game at all. Iran's already qualified, Qatar are too far back, and they're too far ahead of Kyrgyzstan for it to really matter at all. So I just do wonder the dynamic that they'll have in actually deciding who ends up being the top two. And ultimately, what the goal realistically is. Do you go in to win the games? Do you rotate the players? It's a very, very bizarre situation for a country like Qatar to be in as the two-time Asian champions. It is really, really bizarre. Firstly, and I know it's maybe less relevant to you geographically, but I am going to move over to Group B. This whole situation between Jordan and Iraq is really, really interesting, knowing now that Iraq have obviously sacked Jesus Casas, and of all people, all managers in Asia have replaced him with Graham Arnold. I really, really want to know where you think Iraq's stuck in relation to Jordan, because we know Jordan their players have made a few foreign moves as well. They're, also an Asian Cup finalist, as remarkable as it is. But I do feel like for majority of the World Cup cycle, Iraq have looked the better team. And so I come into this thinking it's all to play for match day 10 realistically. Jordan are playing Oman in match day 9. Iraq are playing South Korea, a South Korea team that I think and many people think is there for the taking. It's going to be a really, really tight call. So where are you at with it? And especially that Arnold appointment for Iraq, do you think it's the right thing to do to get them to that automatic spot?
I mean, I've mentioned this several times before, but Jordan versus Iraq is like my favorite modern day rivalry in West Asian football. I mean, especially after that Asian Cup where Jordan came back against Iraq. Ajaz Afghani, the Iranian-Australian referee, gave a very controversial red card to Ayman Hussein, and it's just been crazy after that. I mean, they've played each other at the World Cup qualifiers. They're going to play each other again. And the last automatic World Cup qualifying spot is probably going to come down to one of them. And I think Iraq, even the games which they won this in this round, it's been mostly 1-0 wins. And, there's a limit to that. The luck will, because they've been very lucky, to be honest. And I think it caught up with them. They had a very disappointing window last time out. One draw and a loss. A draw to Kuwait and a loss to Palestine. And I think Jordan have the upper hand now, because even as soon as the 9th match day, they could actually finish off qualification if Iraq managed to drop points to South Korea. And on Graham Arnold, I think that he is a very experienced manager, but he's only ever had one stint outside of Australia. I think that was in Japan back in 2015. Yep. And then I think it's a good idea to bring in a manager like Graham Arnold. It's the right idea, but I don't know if it's the right time, because there's not much time for Iraq. And for Graham Arnold to get used to Iraqi football, to understand how it works, because it's very, very different from Australian football. You can say that for a lot of the West Asian countries as well. So it's going to take time for him to adjust to Iraqi football. And if I'm being realistic, I don't see them changing much in this qualifying cycle. So maybe though in the playoffs, if Iraq don't qualify, I think Graham Arnold could do very well with the team. I think he would understand the team much better.
Erfan, you mentioned that it's very different. Now, I know a lot about, obviously, the challenges of being in Australia, but the difference specifically with a country like Iraq, and I'm just having a guess here, I'd love your opinion. I'm imagining it comes down to two things. One, the quality of the domestic league is maybe not, as strong in a lot of these countries. And two, half of the battle, as seen with the success of a team like Iran, for example, it actually is about going into Western countries, mostly out of Europe, finding Iraqi players in, say, a Germany or a Sweden, and actually calling them forward to the team. So do you think the naturalization process with a Westerner as the coach is actually probably quite a good thing? And is that actually the unique challenge that you're alluding to? I mean, what is so unique about the job?
Those are definitely some of the more important factors. The domestic league doesn't have that much quality, except maybe 2 or 3 teams, and even those are not that good. But I think one of the main challenges as well is the media, because in Iraq, I mean, you could be getting results, but if you're not good with the fans, if they disagree with you over one thing, then that's really gonna be bad for you, because the fans play a big role, especially in Iraq. Iraq, I think, more than a lot of the other West Asian countries, even more than Iran, maybe, because the fans are very emotional, and I think, right now they are supporting Graham Arnold. But if, let's say, after 1 or 2 windows, they don't get the results that the national team wanted, I think it could be very bad for them, and that's why you don't really see Iraqi managers, foreign managers stay in Iraq for a long time. That's probably the main reasons. The media is it's insane over there.
No, I can imagine, as again, as a white Western English speaker, it must just be so crazy to experience. I do just want to give you a bit of a scenario on Group B before we finish. Oman currently sit on 10 points, and I think they're very strongly poised to similar enough to the UAE, potentially even make a bit of a run up the table in Group B. But I'm actually going to look at this from a slightly different angle. They're playing Jordan match day 9. Let's give it a conservative guess and say that they draw, which will then put Oman to 11 points. Notwithstanding the Jordan or Iraq situation, I don't care. The main element for me is actually Palestine. Everything that's going on in Gaza at the moment, for their football team to succeed would be incredible. If Palestine, who they are playing Kuwait, a game that I think we've actually seen them already win once this season, late on in the game. If they take those 3 points, there then becomes a 2-point buffer. Palestine on 9 points, Oman on 11 in the hypothetical situation. They then play each other as well in match day 10, which will obviously be on a neutral site. Palestine can't host the game, but obviously still with it being the listed host game, you'd say that puts them in a relatively favourable position to potentially win and take the 4th place spot to go into the next round of playoffs. How viable is that? And, how big would it be for West Asian football as a whole? And I think culturally, with the way a lot of people maybe feel emotionally about Palestine, how do you think that sort of situation would play out, and what would it mean for a lot of people in West Asia?
Palestine, like you said, with all that's going on back in Gaza, I think they've done really well. They've definitely made their people proud. It's going to be difficult for them to make the playoffs. But you mentioned about the whole hosting situation. They're hosting their games in Jordan, I believe, and trust me, that's going to be like a home game for them. Even against Iraq when they won, you saw the support. It was just absolutely insane from the Jordanians. Palestine drew against Kuwait, I think, last time out. But they were down to 10 men, to be fair to them. I think they played very well still. And I don't see why they can't beat Kuwait this time around. With Kuwait basically having nothing to play for, Palestine definitely will go out with all their hearts, like they have done throughout this whole cycle. And I think it's going to be unlikely, but this is the Asian football. This is AFC World Cup qualifiers. You never know what will happen.
All right. I do just want to finish on a whole with, again, I think you being both, Persian of origin, but having spent a lot of time in the Arab world, in the UAE. Is there a way that you can surmise what something like the FIFA World Cup means to, Arab and Persian people as a whole, just like as a spectacle, what it means to see not just your team, but teams from the region as a whole go there and have success? And ultimately, what do a lot of Arab and Persian people expect? I mean, we were already talking about, Iran potentially being in the round of 16, so you've already given a little bit away in that respect. But is there a view that when we go to the World Cup, we really want to stamp authority and win games? Or is it especially from maybe an Emirati perspective, where if they make it, it's been, 36 years, is it as much about the honor of being there? Or is there a lot of almost expectation when some of these teams could qualify? Maybe if Iraq are playing for the first time in a long time as well. How would the region as a whole perceive the World Cup?
The World Cup is definitely, I think, the most important sporting event here, in both Iran and the Arab world. And for the expectations, I mean, I think for teams that are making either their debut or don't usually qualify, like the UAE, and I think just being there, I think is really great for them, and I think anything after the group stages, it should be a bonus for them. But then there's like a team like Saudi Arabia, who we haven't touched on a lot, but they make the World Cup frequently. They made the last one, they made the one in Russia. I think they would have higher expectations. And it's so important. I mean, I remember back in the 2018 World Cup qualifiers, when Syria was playing against Australia in the playoffs. I remember for the away leg against Australia, I was at school, and it was when the game was taking place, and some of my Syrian classmates. I remember the teacher, even, who was Syrian. He gave permission to the students to watch the game, and they would all go up in the corner, and they were so stressed. After the game finished, they were all heartbroken. You were probably very happy, but they were heartbroken, and it means so much to people over here, whether it's the locals or whether it's the expats like myself.
Yeah, that's a really sweet sentiment. Look, I am going to have a few other people on the show, which is why we're maybe not touching on Bahrain, Saudi Arabia as much, obviously with it being Australia's group as well. But no, thanks so much for your insight. Honestly, it means a lot to hear you, especially describe some of that background on football in the region. I think again, coming from where I do in the world, there's a lot of stereotypes about Middle Eastern people, and to just really see, the impact that sport can have for the region. It's absolutely massive. And just obviously wishing you all the best as well with your work, with Estiklal, with everything, because you've been an absolute pleasure to chat to you. So thanks so much for your time, Erfan.
Thank you so much, Matt. Obviously, very happy to be on again, and I hope I can speak to you soon again.
It's crazy to me, honestly, when I first saw this. From a Graham Arnold angle, it seems like he was perhaps out of too many options. When he exited the Socceroos, the vibe I was getting off him was clearly he wanted a club role somewhere that wasn't Australia. And it's clear that he had those suitors after the last World Cup. And I think if he probably had his time again, he would have chosen differently in terms of signing that new contract for the Socceroos. Not to say he didn't believe at the time that he could keep on doing a job with Australia, but that's just the way it turned out. And then there's the Iraq angle, right, of clearly Australian managers have increase their reputation in world football. You're right to point out Ange Postecoglou. Obviously, the kind of doubling down of Kevin Muscat coming into Yokohama F. Marinos after Ange's departure was really big for that as well. You have a lot more Australian players going and filling these kind of marquee spots in Asian leagues around the region. So that influence is really cool. And there were a couple other big guns going for this job. But at the end of the day, it was Graham Arnold that got it. So that's really cool. As you say, Australia could be two of the 48 coaches, which is well punching above our weight at a FIFA World Cup, which is pretty cool. But just the whole scenario around this, the fact that his contract runs to the end of the Asian Cup, but is cancelled immediately if he doesn't make the World Cup, with the group standing as they are, he could technically miss out on even the fourth round of qualification. So it could be a 2-game contractual stint as a coach, which is wild as well. Obviously, that's out of the realms of realistic, but with a 6-point gap. But, this game, obviously, against Jordan is massive. That's going to be the one that will tip the scales in terms of the two teams that are fighting for that second qualification spot behind South Korea. So, lots of stakes on the line, as we say, with these final kind of window of phase 3 of qualification. And I'm looking forward. It's going to be weird seeing Graham Arnold with a different national team, but best of luck to him.
So there's all this fixation on kind of part 2 of that just absolutely insane game we saw at the Asian Cup, and rightly so. I mean, to this day, it probably is one of the best games of football I've ever seen be played, right? That's the level of intensity we're talking about. But I think the biggest thing for me with Group B is that South Korea have actually really started to underdeliver, and they could even be there for the taking. Where I also kind of sit on it is knowing Iraq and knowing what a lot of fans have been saying. I think the departure of Jesus Casas was one that was actually quite a shock to the system, because they were quite an exciting team to play, but they clearly, knowing the expansion of the World Cup has a direct effect on a country like Iraq, I think the FA's basically just set a standard of we're making it automatically no matter what, and especially at the expense of a country like Jordan, who they see as such a fierce rival that wrongfully knocked them out of the Asian Cup. To talk about the Australian angle, Ali Reza Fagani giving that controversial red card. I was going to say, that was the red card celebration, yeah. Yes. And Erfan reminded me of that it was Fagani that gave the red card. So there's just so many layers to this that just makes me so excited about it. But really just talking about Iraq and their football at large, I think if there's maybe something that's a bit of an issue here, I think they've just seen that label of this is a guy that's made the round of 16 without really thinking about the fact that quite a forward-facing team, quite an attacking team, is now at the verge of playing arty ball, which is anything but exciting. And also just the relationship between a starlet of Asian football in Ayman Hussein, he's English, I don't even really know if he knows English all that well, and bloody Graham Arnold. He's just such a unique dynamic to me. Where are you at with that?
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Obviously, the first thing is the language barrier. As you said, I know they've appointed a former player as a translator. I forget his name off the top of the head. You can butt in if you want, but to have to deal with that is a big thing. There's a massive cultural clash there as well. I think some of the squad do play in Western countries, so maybe that will make it a little bit easier for Graham Arnold just to interact with people. But then there are also coaches, dependent on their personality, that can really kind of just shove all that off to one side. And, as we like to say, the old football cliche, the language of football takes over, right? So I think the thing that Graham Arnold can kind of lean on is the fact that this is a little bit of a smash and grab job. You don't really have to lean into the long term too much at the moment. It's just about these 2 games and maybe a fourth phase of qualification. You just need to get the football right for a couple of games, and then hopefully that stuff will come a little bit later.
And I want to have that conversation about the long term. I want to think about the fact that Graham Arnold will be bloody excellent as someone who can go to Germany and France and speak to people of Iraqi descent. And in the exact same way that Carlos Queiroz did with Iran all those years ago, take all these players out of Europe and make Iraq like a powerhouse. I can actually back, a Westerner and Graham Arnold to be someone to do that. But there's no
He's still
point in
holding on to his
thinking-
Ancestry.com subscription.
but look, there's no. But look, there's actually no point in having that conversation. Like there's just no point because it is the smash and grab nature of the job. And as I've said, they're playing South Korea first, and it is a South Korea team that really, in my heart of hearts, I think is there for the taking. So. As far as, however many points they'll need, whatever Jordan have in hand, any slip-ups they could potentially have, where do you sit directly with Group A? And you've mentioned the potential of them even missing out altogether, barring a freak scenario. So where are you sitting on Group B?
Look, Palestine are 6 points below Iraq in fifth place and 6 goals difference as well. So, look, Graham Arnold missing out and getting sacked not even getting sacked, just having his contract expired after 2 games. It won't happen. That's very unlikely. But I think credit has to go, and this has happened with Australia in Group C as well. The way the fixturing has worked out, we've got the 3 top teams, as much as it's possible, having 2 games in the window, playing against each other and deciding these moments, right? So it's exciting that maybe a team like South Korea, maybe Sonny's had a big week of celebrations and it was a little worse for wear, who knows? Could they catch them off guard? And then, as you say, you've got that Asian Cup repeat between Jordan and Iraq. And look, South Korea realistically don't need to do too much. If they just take a point off Iraq in this first game, then they're qualified. So it's a different mentality. It's almost like you're looking at Japan, and we've heard about their squad selection because they're done. But South Korea are just having that little bit more to prove. They still have to get over the line. It's a different kind of mindset that Iraq are going to come up against. So. Yeah, obviously they've played 3 draws in a row, so are they there for the taking? Well, yeah, the form line would say yes, but there's nothing like World Cup qualification to motivate a national team group.
I also do just love the idea of an Iraqi victory here. The national stadium in Basra going just absolutely berserk. The context of the fact that stadium was built, in the background of the war and all these things that could just, elicit emotion so easily. And seeing Graham bloody Arnold at the heart of it, I just, it just bloody warms my heart so much. It really does. And it's such a uniting force for our diversity as one entity within the AFC, to have someone from the eastern suburbs of Sydney, to have, formerly war-torn Iraq in the Basra Stadium is not just because of what it represents in post-war Iraq, but especially it just is a place where the atmosphere is banging no matter what. You could watch a domestic game there and the scenes will just be next level. And I love the idea of if they sneak that win past South Korea, the country is really going to start to believe, and it's really, really going to be a special, special moment. But just
on that theme as well, sorry to cut in, but on a kind of broader spectrum, ever since Australia has entered the AFC in 2006, there has been a quite apparent, Australia kind of butting in to this Asian atmosphere and not always being considered as part of that region. And I think opportunities like Graham Arnold and going to coach the Iraqi national team as opportunities to break those barriers down. So as you say, it's cool and it celebrates our diversity in this region.
But I also find that as a whole, Australia is really being accepted in a way that it wasn't even 5 or 6 years ago. Having Australian players openly welcomed into the ASEAN All Stars team that are going to play Man United as well. That's an example of something where, the AFF, as far as I've known, have always been pretty bullish about Australia's existence and never really been comfortable with the concept of having to house them. But it seems that table has really, really turned. Our youth teams are starting to get some really awesome results within the region. And, someone like Harrison Delbridge is going to be teammates with some of these players out of the Thai league and things like that. It's very, very.
I think Tony Popovich has been public on his comments to want to get more involved with ASEAN football as well, with the championships and somewhat.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been calling for it for 10 years now, so I'll leave that commentary because it is obviously more of a West Asian focus here with the chat. Jordan's game away to Muscat, I also feel like from their perspective, the reason I get a bit of an optimism as, basically a closet Arnold and Iraq fan throughout this process is that Oman can still actually qualify as well with results going certain ways. So much to play for across, and you're right, in the way that the draws the way the draw has worked, rather, there's just so much going on in every single direction. I mean, I was having the chat with Erfan and with Cody, Kyrgyzstan can even be split in Group A. Like, that's the nature of what we're talking about. And I just see Oman's hunger. I know firsthand over the years what a side like Oman at home has been like for the Socceroos to deal with, I was talking with Jack from Deadball TV about the fact that one of the most memorable Socceroos fixtures of recent times for me was when, we went to Muscat on the verge of 2022 becoming a bit of a disaster, and we got complacent, and they immediately snapped up and got the points off us and secured the draw. And knowing that they have points on the line, knowing that they've had a reputation to uphold as complete opposite fortunes of Jordan. Jordan's overachieved at the Asian Cup. Oman severely underachieved at the Asian Cup. They lost out to Thailand, who Thailand aren't even in this part of the World Cup cycle. So I just feel a bit of hunger from the Omanis in that game. All they have to do is draw it, and, we're having that conversation 2 or 3 hours later about, if Iraq take those 3 points, the table can just turn. It can turn in an instant like that. And the fact that that's going on in all 3 of these groups with some of these games, it really, for me, suggests that this may well happen, that Iraq's automatic qualification spot might be there.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't think I have too much that I can add, but the fact that everything is still up in the air, it brings the opportunity for those moments, doesn't it? And we've had some very famous moments in the history of Asian football over the years, and these 2 weeks coming up, they're going to be the opportunity to write some more. So it's absolutely enthralling, and I can't wait to get stuck into the football.
Yeah, one last parting question for you. Do you think Graham Arnold is actually going to, dare I say, try and depart from his style in terms of being manager of such a unique side in such a unique environment?
Not for these 2 games. I think he's a clever enough individual to understand that nothing is going to happen too quickly in terms of a dramatic shift in football. So he's going to take stock of what he has, of his cattle, so to speak, and see what he's got and where he can put them. And whatever the best combination is for next Thursday night and then the Tuesday after, try to qualify for a World Cup and do what's familiar to the players. Because as much as it is difficult for a manager in club football to come in the middle of a season, Graham Arnold used to be in the role for a little while, but obviously he hasn't seen his players firsthand. He hasn't been able to train them. We know that's the difficulties with international football. So I don't see him trying to impart too much, maybe just a couple of words of wisdom here and there, and get his best players out and try qualify for a World Cup.
Sounds good. Well, we are wishing the absolute best to the Iraqi team, and for what it's worth, I'd actually predicted them to come second originally. So the fact that we're here all these months later, and you've got the Graham Arnold angle, I'm really looking forward to it. And you can consider me a pretty open Iraqi supporter from now on. So we'll see how it goes, and just another tale in this week ahead of us.
Very good.
By now, we know the story. The World Cup is decided in moments. The qualification process from far-flung destinations all across the Asia-Pacific through to the eventual testing environment of the tournament itself. But those moments aren't just decided by grit and spirit. The moments are decided by individuals themselves. Redmayne in 22, Jedinak in 18, and so on and so forth. So who in 2026 will pick up the mantle? Who will qualify Australia for the 2026 FIFA World Cup? That is the big question, and there are many icons in the media world in the Australian football landscape. However, it would be remiss of me not to have a little reunion with the man I'm inviting on in Mr. Cody Ojeda, because we have done, I want to think about this, back for Front Page Football, we did the pre-qualifying for 2022. We did a World Cup show ourselves at the time under a label you had. We then did the 2023 Home Women's World Cup, and have done basically, as much Socceroos or Matildas related content in and around both of those cycles. Now jumping into 2026, there was actually only one option, but to get Cody Ojeda here with me today. So Cody, Firstly, how are you? And how are you feeling ahead of match day 9 and 10?
First of all, how am I? That's a very nostalgic reflection on our work together, and
Yes.
sometimes I don't sit and think back how long I've actually been doing some of this for. It's like I know the World Cup's coming up, but it hasn't actually dawned on me yet that when that comes around, it's the second World Cup that I would have gone through that I've in a way covered, which is crazy to think about. How confident am I feeling, or how am I feeling going into the next games? I'll be real with you, I'm not feeling very good.
Okay.
I'm probably sitting on the pessimistic side of things, unfortunately. But every time the Socceroos are in action, it's always a good time. So there's always a bit of hope.
Well, that most certainly is a take, and I'll tell you why. Because I talk about those men in moments and the way it happens. I think the big story here is, yeah, we'll have a moment at some point, whether it be in Perth, whether it be in Jeddah, whether it be in round 4. God hope it's not in round 4. There will be that moment, right? But it's so multifaceted in this regard, in that it could be basically out of our hands that moment is provided. That moment could be provided at, I think, 2 or 3 a.m. Western Australian time in the aftermath of that Perth kickoff, next week, where Bahrain score against the Saudis, and that clinches a 3 or 4 point lead that can't really be over. They can't surpass us. Saudi can't surpass us. I'm so bad with words.
It doesn't even need to be a goal. It could just be, and more likely of it. Bahrain just holding Saudi 2-0 all.
Yeah, no, exactly right. With that in mind, though, you're actually on the pessimistic side. So I will pass over to you. We know Japan's squad is definitely on the weaker side, but I think it's only weak in the sense that there's not a lot of national team experience. These guys straight out of Europe and the J-League will be an absolute mission to surpass. So I'm assuming just on Japan's known quality on the whole is where you go into this Perth game feeling rather worried.
I don't know if I've ever felt confident playing against Japan, at least in the last 10 years. The young Socceroos beating them in, I think it was March now, was it? That was a shock to me. It was a great shock. I'll definitely welcome it, but it was still very much a shock. You look at this Japan side on paper. I know they've rotated. You got no Matoma, no Ueda. A lot of their main strikers have taken a backward, or not a backward step, but they've taken a step out, probably just to give them a rest. They've already qualified for the World Cup. Or you got Notice or Doan, but you still got quality. You look at the places these guys are playing. You got obviously some of the top performers in the J League. You got Serie A, still there's Premier League quality in there. Championship, top division of Netherlands, Germany as well. If we had players, we barely have the quality at that level. It's a tough one, because I know what gets Australia through isn't necessarily our on-field quality. It's, I guess, how we can kind of come together, that camaraderie, that Aussie DNA, as Graham Hunt would like to call it. But Japan, their quality on paper is so stacked. I never feel confident going into a game against them. And the reality is, there's a lot of riding on that first game. I'm not going to say it's impossible to get a result, and I think if we are going to go through the World Cup at this stage, that game in Perth is paramount. That's a funny word to use considering where it would be shown. But yeah, it's a tough one. I think there's a path to victory if we get our core defensive responsibilities right. We've got the right coach for it in that regard. But I'm not going to sit here and say, yeah, we're going to have that moment in Perth, because we're playing against the best side in Asia. And even if it's their B team or A- team, because there are still some quality players in there. You still got Wataru Endo, Zion Suzuki, he's still come down. It's still a brilliant side. Their B side is probably still the second best team in Asia. So it's not a foregone conclusion, and I am not going to sit here and say I'm confident we're going to do this, because if I'm honest with you, I'm not, and I don't want to lie to you, Matt, and I don't want to lie to myself either.
Yeah, no. I just think the reputation alone speaks for itself. You go into this game and you just kind of feel that rush of we know what's going on from a Socceroos perspective. We know what's going right. We know where the excitement lies, but you cannot get complacent like that against this opponent, and that's ultimately the overriding feeling. Let's talk points. Let's talk the table. This is really big for me, because where I'm at mentally with this is that Saudi game. For me, it just has to be all about parking the bus and, basically defending for our lives, because I feel that no matter how the Japan game plays out, no matter how Bahrain's game with Saudi plays out, I just feel like a draw will be enough. I'm just in my heart of hearts, I just feel like that draw will be enough. It's a 3-point buffer right now, and and unless they go out and smoke Bahrain by a few goals, and we have a loss against Japan, maybe the situation's a bit different there. But there's so many variables that would have to go Saudi's way. With the way they've been playing, they've only scored the 4 goals. I just can't, for me, sense that it'll overwhelmingly swing in their direction. They still have so much to work out under Hervé Renard. And that 3-point buffer is doing so much for me right now,
And it's not something to discount. And the reality is we get some form of result against Japan, or Saudi failed to get a win against Bahrain. It changes the course of things. If we've got a 3-point buffer going into that Saudi Arabia game, we're in good stead, because it's basically just don't get smacked. But if we need to expect even a draw, Jeddah is not an easy place to go to. It's one of the toughest away trips that you'll do in Saudi Arabia. And look, it's one that Australia's probably exceeded expectations in the last few years, but it's not something that I want to go in with riding on like, we need to get something out of this, because if we need to get something out of it, Saudi Arabia need to get something out of it too. I had to back one of those two in a do or die game in Saudi Arabia, in Jeddah, in front of 60,000 or so odd people. You've got to lean towards Saudi Arabia. They've got good quality. They've got home crowd behind them. It's not a place that I want to go to, and it's not a place that I back ourselves if we're playing a must win. It's a situation we were in. No, it wasn't a situation we were in last time. We were already out by then. But either way, it's not a fun place to go to, and I'm not putting stocks in us getting a result in that situation, unfortunately.
Yeah, but I would say that even because obviously 2 draws is enough to send us through, right? Regardless of what Saudi's result is against Bahrain, just the 2 points on the line. And I think even a draw in Perth, we just go there with confidence. We go there with confidence. And Tony Popovich is someone with a management portfolio where I could say, like, I just know he can get the job done. Let's not forget, he won a continental title on Saudi Arabian soil. Like, I feel like he's...
That's true, and it'll be the same stadium, isn't it?
No, that was Riyadh.
It's King Fahd. Yes, wrong one.
Yes.
Wrong king. Apologies to the Saudi Arabian community.
Is it Abdullah? Is Jeddah Abdullah?
Sport City.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah,
that's right.
It's funny because you got a coach that has shown with Australia that he can match it with Japan, then actually take a step towards them on their turf. So hopefully, we're doing the same thing on ours. And yeah, I didn't actually count the fact that, he's been in Saudi Arabia, he's faced that kind of atmosphere, and he knows how to manage his players through, and he's got a much higher quality side at his hands now than what he had with the Wanderers, and he's probably going up the same level of quality in terms of his opponents. So look, it's not out of the question. I just don't think we'd be favourites.
No, I get it, but I reflect on, even when things were really bad for us, right? Like, let's not forget, the campaign started losing to Bahrain and drawing Indonesia. And I remember I was talking to Ian Polzinski, and one of our old colleagues at Front Page Football, and I said to him, I literally said to him at the time, with the way Mancini and Saudi are going, this is a window of opportunity for the Socceroos, no matter what. And I still look at the fact that Hervé Renard struggled, right? He came in with the loss to Indonesia, where Marcelinho Ferdinand was prime Barcelona style and just completely floored, that team to the ground. And I look at that and I think, as experienced as he is, as much as those players would want to give a lot for him, as much as, I think their squad retention in relation to most of the continent compares, I look at it and I think to myself, they're still going to struggle to be on that front foot if we're holding us and going on the back foot. And again, this is off the back of only needing a draw in Perth, Cody. So, I look at it and I just think everything lines up enough in the Socceroos' favour for the pessimism and the we're going to finish third element of this to really come through. The scale of it has to be pretty remarkable. It has to basically require, not two straight losses, because I think obviously 1 point wouldn't be enough, but it would require a pretty demoralising result in either game, no matter what. And it would require Saudi to hit form and an experimental Japanese side to hit form as well. There's enough in that sense for I'm kind of getting away from it. But I think we've said...
No, you're on the right track because you're saying it requires either then to hit form. I reckon Saudi Arabia will hit form. That's where my argument comes in.
Yeah.
They've had the 2 games under Hervé Renard. They had the They beat China at home. They had a draw with Japan away. Obviously, Japan qualified by then. There's nothing to say that they're going to go to Bahrain. They'll get the result they need, and then they look at Australia. If we drop points, it's like all we need to do is win. Doesn't matter about goal difference. Doesn't matter what's happened before. And let's just say we get a draw or lose to Japan. It doesn't need to be Saudi Arabia smacking us. It could be them smacking Bahrain, and their goal difference turns on his head too.
Yeah, look, I take your point. I do also want to chat a bit more broadly about the AFC and about Group C, and we don't have a whole lot of time, so I'm actually just going to roll this onto the situation and the formulation and everything like that, and run the conversation back to our men in moments, my big intro at the start there, we didn't really touch on it, and the squad itself. I know we've only got the training camp in Abu Dhabi at the moment, but I really want you to embrace it, okay? Mila Jedinak under Ange Postecoglou, John Aloisi in 06, Jimmy Mackay in 74, and of course Andrew Redmayne's heroics under Graham Arnold. Who is the man in the moment in 2026? The 2026 cycle.
If you're looking at something that happens in the Japan game, I'd probably liken it to Iraq in 2014, where it was purely just a tactical sub, and we just started peppering balls in the box. Josh Kennedy, great player, but probably not the standout striker at that time, of course, and it was the one that I was able to pop up. I honestly wouldn't be surprised, and you'll love this because it'd actually be a little bit of sentiment for you, like just not a top class striker that we've had.
You're going to say Adam Taggart?
Yeah, I'm going to say Adam Taggart. Like someone that he's good, maybe not great by Socceroos standards, but someone who can definitely do a job on his day. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets subbed on 65th, 70th minute. They gave him a few balls, maybe a cutback cross. He comes in, poaches finish. He's a hero in his hometown. I actually can see a scenario like that playing out. And it may not qualify us for the World Cup straight away, but if the reality is we beat Japan, and it's a big if, because I understand the task at hand to do that. We haven't done, I think you was talking about it offline the other day, it's been since 2009 that the senior men's Socceroos have beaten Japan, which is ridiculous. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a scenario like that. And it creates that moment, like as much as, maybe we've got to wait for Bahrain to result, or we've got to get through the Saudi Arabia game. If we beat Japan, I don't see a path for Saudi Arabia to qualify ahead of us. Like I said, big if. But you'd still look at that moment and go, that's what qualified us for the World Cup, because it put the scenario beyond doubt. And for the first time, we've actually been able to go into the final game of a qualifying process like, yep, we're set. We're okay. So I can see a scenario like that maybe playing out. I do think this Japan side is still going to be ridiculously good, though.
Yeah. Look, I love the Taggart shout for very, very obvious reasons.
I'm looking at our squad. I'm looking who's a forward that isn't like a guaranteed nailed-on starter, or like our superstar, one that, like, if I said Aaron Kunta, it would be a bit of a normie thing. He's not even probably going to be in the squad. But like, if I'm talking to someone with that name, that's kind of what you expect. I think it's going to be someone that's probably not the first person thing of. It could be even someone like Brandon Borello. For all I know, like I wouldn't be surprised if it's something like, I'm talking that kind of caliber, like an A-Leagues player.
Yeah, no. Well, but the sentiment is correct, right? Because Josh Kennedy, there was obviously people in his time that were far more important to the Australian cause. Yeah. Andrew Redmayne, it kind of speaks for itself, right? He was there. He was there to basically recreate the grand final for us. Yeah, he was there to recreate the grand final.
No one before. I remember him playing during that 21-22 season. I'm sorry, I'm going to get off track for a sec.
Yeah.
And with all due respect to Redmayne, he was pretty arse that season. He wasn't good. 90% of Socceroos fans didn't want him anywhere near the squad, and I'm pretty sure no one wanted to see him coming off the bench in that game as well. But it's those kinds of players that you look at it and go, you know what? Okay, maybe they do have a lot to lose, but I think in Australian culture, when people are backs against the wall like that, it's like, I need to step up. I find a lot of the times the Socceroos, they tend to do that. And that's what kind of excites me about Japan, because it's a game that, realistically, we don't have a right to win. And I will sit here and say we probably won't win. But it's in those moments where we tend to surprise people, including myself, or people like myself. So that's the only bit of hope that I have going into this game. If I look at it from any pure analytical point of view, we get played off the park. But there's that thing that it's what I know about Australians, it's what I know the Socceroos can do, and that's the reason why I've got just an inkling in the back of my mind going, yeah, we can do this. We may be able to do this.
And every
so
good...
it's probably that little bit of hope that'll kill me.
No, but it's for me, it's every good moment in Socceroos history, and especially Socceroos recent history, where when you get the inkling, is when they fire. And
Yeah.
I've got this stupid thing in my head that's going, look at everything that's happened in England. Like the Newcastle situation, the Palace situation, the Tottenham situation. Is 2025 just the year where, like, humble, nice, well-loved English-speaking places break streaks? Because if it is, then the Socceroos are going to win this game. But obviously they will still, pending Bahrain taking points off Saudi Arabia. Let's say Saudi Arabia win that fixture, right? Then the situation and the man in the moment doesn't necessarily go down to who scores the goal in Perth, as much as it does some Harry Sutar-esque heroics from a defensive player in Jeddah, where it's like, that tackle was huge. That was the moment. And there are so many characters that shout could come down to. And I know... I know that obviously with the training camp there will be a lot of people that are vying just to obviously get into the squad, but clearly they're long-term projects, right? You talk about Western Australians, Alessandro Ciccardi.
Yeah.
That
Look, it's not one that I bank on just purely because he's still come back from a long-term injury. And if I'm being honest, I don't know if I actually want him to play in that Japan game, just purely because, God forbid he screws his knee up again. It's going to be disastrous for club and country. It's not something you want to see him go through. I'd rather I keep him in the Middle East. Let him join the squad for the Saudi Arabia game, maybe. But I'd probably take my care with him. That's the only thing I'd probably say on his regard.
Well, remember, I mean, the situation I'm talking about is just making one tackle late on in the game. He only needs to play 20 minutes between the two matches.
I don't know if I want him to travel altogether. That's where I'm coming from. But you can have someone like Burgess step up in that regard. Jason Gerrier.
Yep.
Like there's players there that can
all
do
good
it.
shouts.
We've got there's players there that can do a job on their day. It's just going to be a really, really tough day. And I've got a question for you actually, Matt, because it's something that I've just thought about. Is there a scenario where Australia and Saudi Arabia kind of shit the bed that bad that Indonesia takes over both of them?
That is the big question for... That's the big question for other groups. And I feel like if there's enough talk about UAE could sneak in ahead of Uzbekistan, the beautiful historic story that Erfan and I were talking about with Palestine. I mean, could Palestine sneak into the playoffs? There's so much of that stuff going on. And honestly, there's too much individual quality with Saudi Arabia and Australia. Indonesia, for all their hype, they're going to be content enough with a playoff spot. I'm not willing to entertain it. What I will ask you is, though, because it's not just Group C we want to talk about. I think you're saying Japan and Saudi Arabia out of Group C, but you do bring up those extra points. And so I just want to know, if you've been looking across the AFC, is there anything that you see that's going to spring up a surprise? Because I don't
know if I see a surprise.
Okay.
Like, I think Group A, look, I don't think there's enough with UAE to...
They are playing Uzbekistan.
Funnily enough, I don't think it's the Uzbekistan game that worries me for them. I'd actually be more worried about how they go against Kyrgyzstan, because even if Uzbekistan lose that game against UAE...
Going to Bishkek is very difficult.
Qatar. Uzbekistan won't lose 2 games in this next round of qualifiers. They'll win at least one of them. They'll qualify for the World Cup. And frankly... the way that country's been growing in football recently, they deserve it. And look, you'd probably know this better than me, but I can't think of a time where a Central Asian country has actually been at the World Cup. So it'll be interesting to see how that region gets to be represented on the world stage too. But Group B is probably the more interesting one, because Jordan and Iraq are kind of fighting for that second spot, and South Korea aren't exactly out of the woods in qualifying. And Iraq have to play the both sides above them. So great introduction for Graham Arnold over there. But that's probably the more exciting part, because you got the sides of the top playing against each other. Iraq and Jordan are both probably on par a little bit with quality. either of them, they're both kind of a stone's throw away from the World Cup in their own mind, and it's a flip of the coin over who you'd probably say deserves it more or less. It's and either of them go through the playoffs, you back them to make the World Cup as well.
Yes.
But that Iraq and Jordan game, I think, will be really, really interesting because basically whoever wins that game probably qualifies for the World Cup. There's a lot of riding on that game.
I've already spoken about it with Erfan. Lockie and I have had the chat as well.
Yeah.
Because of the Graham Arnold effect and because sadly our Iraqi guest couldn't make it. So by the time this is out, this is probably the fifth or sixth time it's been mentioned on the show. But yes, Iraq and Jordan is an incredible fixture for everyone involved.
And then you got the Palestine story where you don't know what's going to happen. If they're playing two sides that are either side of them, they've got every chance to sneak into the top
and
four.
By the way, in Group B, Oman can make it automatically as well. There's too much going on.
That group's actually quite exciting. It's that's what you want to see as well in qualifying, and especially with the 48-team World Cup.
I do love the idea of this UAE team under the new coach from Sharjah, who's just won the ACL too. The new coach comes in, they thrash Uzbekistan on home soil. Imagine it. They go to Bishkek and completely shit the bed, staring automatic qualification right in the eyes. Can you imagine? Kyrgyzstan of all countries playing spoiler?
Then I wouldn't be surprised. Kyrgyzstan, I think, on their day aren't too bad. They've I was actually doing a bit of. I didn't go out of my way to get this research. It purely popped up in my socials. Apparently they've kind of like what you see with a few other countries. And Australia's been a good example of this in the past, but they've had a lot of players go into their domestic competition that are higher quality to what they're able to produce as a country, and they've been there that long still now that they've been able to be naturalized, and their their squad looks a little bit less like a Central Asian side and more like a slightly more worldwide side. So it's they've got players coming in. People seem to enjoy living over there, so they've been able to recruit in a sense, which is a weird thing to do in international football, but. There's quality there that may be able to surprise people. So I'm not saying they'll get to the World Cup. I'm not even saying they'll get to the playoffs, but they are well capable of producing a surprise against UAE.
If I were to give you one wild card scenario for each of the three groups, what do you think could happen? You've already said Indonesia for Group C. I don't know if you want to extrapolate.
I don't think
on
it'll happen. It's just a funny thought because technically it can.
Yeah, no, that's right. So if you were to give a funny call, as you're saying, to the other groups.
See, the outrageous call that I'm picking right now is Palestine because they're 4 points behind. It's not something that realistically should happen on paper. But I look at the games that they have in front of them, and it's possible.
Yeah.
And they'll go, look, Oman's probably the harder of the two that they'll play. They've got to play it in Jordan, so they're not... It's no one's home ground. No one's going to be going out and emotionally be invested in either side. But especially in the Middle East, especially in countries like Jordan, there's probably a bit more goodwill around Palestine where it's like, you know what, we want to see this team succeed. We want to see this team do well. So they might end up with a little bit of support in Jordan against what will probably be a slightly stronger Oman side. And they could get the job done. And making playoffs for them from the position they're coming from would be absolutely massive for the country. It'd be a great story. It'll send shockwaves around the world. Forget who qualifies out of Asia, and we'll have 5 teams. That are going to have the story that we've qualified, but Palestine will end up taking over as the story coming out of the AFC in June.
Yes, yeah, which is crazy, but also there's something about it that I didn't mention to Erfan, and again we're reaching the end of the podcast, so I it's a shame I haven't kind of mentioned this more forwardly, but. It would just be so ironic that Jordan, Kuwait, and Oman, the three countries that have been the most hospitable, by the way, the most countries have said, the Palestinian cause, come play on our turf, our FA will look after your players, and they knock them out in the face of that. There's just something about that really rubs me the right way, because it's like, yeah, look at all these good deeds you're doing for Palestinian aid, and their football team's just knocked you out of the World Cup.
I'll end the podcast on something that my Year 6 teacher, Mr. O'Rourke, said to me about Australia and New Zealand. So he explained the relationship between the two countries as New Zealand's like our little brothers, where we're learning about history and our relationship with them. And it's like, in history, we're always backing them up if we've got to go to war. We make sure we look after them. Anything that we can do to assist them, we do, at least from a, not sociological, but from a societal point of view, we make sure we look after them. I don't know if that's a disrespectful thing to say to New Zealand, that they need our help or handouts or anything like that. But I mean it from a good place, that, you know, they've got our back, we've got their back, and, you know, we're a larger country, so we will defend them. But then when it comes to sports, we want nothing more than to get one over the other, because, like, yeah, we're the big brother, we should be dominating over you. And for them, it's like they're the little brother, they want to get one over us because they're technically the smaller country. So that scenario could be playing out in Kuwait. I don't think it's going to ruin the goodwill between the two countries. And I'm sure Kuwait and the other neighbours will look out for them as they go through the humanitarian crisis they are. But Palestine will still look at it and go, you know what, we want to make our mark. Like, yeah, you're helping us, but, you know, this is sport, this is different. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
Likewise, however, I'm just going to stop you there. I want the final note because this is like on the verge of the Perth kickoff, right? And the June window for Socceroos. So I'm the sentiment is beautiful, and you know the Palestinian cause from a football sense, like absolutely. But we need that final touch from me and you to be Socceroos related. So I'm just going to hand it back to you. You've already given the Taggart shout. You've already kind of said that you think Saudi Arabia is making it through. But is there a message about the legacy of a 2026 team that qualifies and what their responsibility would be to match the round of 16 performance in Qatar, right? Because ultimately, when it's all said and done, we have a new generation of players coming through. I think the A-League from from a resources on the field perspective has grown immensely. So what will the legacy be, and what should the expectation be when we book that ticket to North America?
See, I don't know if I have much way of expectation. I think we were lucky to get as far as what we did in 2022. I think we've got a good core of young players that, you know, as they hit their heights, could take Australia deep into a World Cup. I honestly think it's about playing the long game. Keep us in the forefront of the international community. Go there, get one or two results. If we get knocked out around a 32, but we come away with a win or two in the group stage, I'll look at that as a reasonably acceptable World Cup. It'd be great if we could get to the round of 16. It'd be great if we could win a knockout game for the first time in our history, because I think that sets up some goodwill around football in this country, keeps at the forefront of the media. If we get out of the group stage 2 World Cups in a row, suddenly, you know, you're looking at, okay, we probably should start paying attention to football as a country. But I don't think this is a squad that'll create a new extended legacy to what other sides have done in the past. Like if you're talking 26, 2022, you know, they did well for what they could. We're going to have a squad in 5 to 10 years that you can look at, and if everyone, and it's a big if, but if everyone around the young age groups that we have now can reach their potential, you know, suddenly we're looking at, it's like, okay, can we maybe be a smoky for quarters? If we can get to a last 8 in a 48 team international football tournament, that will be insane. But I don't think this is our time yet. I think it's just a matter of going out there, showing what we can do as a football country, that, you know, we can step up to the biggest names in football. But I don't know if we're there yet to actually like create a legacy and go, we are a nation to be worried about when it comes to football. Our time will come. I don't know if this is it, but you know, it's also Australia as well. And when the chips are down and when you least expect it, they tend to come up with a surprise. So 2026, who knows what's going to happen? It's one of those things. And look, I do think we'll be there, even if we go through the playoff. I think if we go through the playoff, we'll steamroll the playoffs. But I think once we get there, it won't be like 2018 where we just look hopeless, or 2014 where we're completely outclassed by the sides we're going up against, maybe except for Netherlands, which I think was a surprise to most people. But I think we'll be okay. We'll get a win, maybe 2, maybe get to the round of 32. If we get any further, I will probably cry again, like I did after Tunisia.
I think the parting message here, and I think the overall sentiment on what we're saying is the bit of optimism within the game and the bit of optimism within us, you cherish that and you hold that really, really close. Because when it counts, and if we beat Japan in that game, and pretty much the ticket is booked, pending, you know, and especially if Bahrain draw, and that Friday morning is actually going to be nuts in WA off the back of that. That's the moment that you cherish really, really closely. So I think the biggest thing from what you're saying and from what I'm hearing is maybe there's a lot to be worked out, but there's always going to be a shred of optimism on how far the game can go, and there's always going to be a shred of optimism that we can exceed expectations. So
optimism probably isn't the right word. Hope, I think, is
hope.
the better word. There's always a little bit of hope. There's always a little bit of hope, and sometimes it kills you, and sometimes it's what you got to hold dear. Look, I don't think we'll beat Japan, but I'm gonna hope to God that we do, because if we do, it may be one of my favorite experiences in football. Just seeing that, it'll be like watching Tunisia, except I'll be 11:30 on my couch and afterwards going to sleep to go to work tomorrow.
Yeah, and I am sorry
nowadays.
I am sorry to hear about it from that perspective, but with love and hope, Cody, I just you don't use like a tagline or a name anymore. So in terms of like where to find you, it actually is just your name. Is the brand now, right?
Cody Jeter. I am who I am. I still got the logo on the shirt that I wore when I was going down that path. But maybe I'll bring it back one day. But for now, I am me.
All right. With love and hope and joy, signing off for basically the end of the World Cup cycle, unless we go to the playoffs. So see you wherever the journey takes us next. All right. All right, Lockie. So we've heard from some pretty impassioned voices throughout, and just knowing now that all we've got ahead of us is to watch a lot of the football that's to come in the next week. I know that excitement and all of the platitudes that you can use are one way to describe it, but I do kind of like some of the sentiment that Cody was just touching on about kind of really just having a moment to kind of spark a bigger conversation. I think when we look at any potential disappointments or excitements that any of these countries can have in securing a spot for the World Cup, the biggest thing is just being able to cement a legacy. Even in the face of a negative result, you're able to really build something special. So I guess if I could get some closing comments from you, firstly, just what the World Cup actually means to you personally, and what you think it would mean to people from, let's say Iraq, Uzbekistan, some of these countries where they're going to be going for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the beauty of the World Cup is that more than any other football tournament in the world celebrates the diversity of what is the world game, right? And it seems every time we come around to a World Cup, we see videos from creators and news networks in Europe and pundits doing their predictions, and the AFC and the OFC are always underrepresented in terms of what their expectations should be. And it's always a fun told you so moment when they're inevitably proven wrong. And the fact that the FIFA World Cup has now expanded to 48 teams. Obviously, the AFC has been a big benefactor of that, jumping from 4.5 to 8.5 spots, which is really, really cool for the region. It allows for more of those opportunities. It allows for the teams that have been there and done it before to get back to the tournament and have another go. And then that kind of next category of teams that we've talked about throughout this episode, they have their moment for these drought-breaking World Cup appearances and making impacts on the international stage and prove more European pundits wrong. So it's a great time to be a fan of Asian football, and I know you're very excited about it as well. And these 2 weeks in particular, we're going to get some of those really big sparks, as Cody was talking about, into some of these bigger stories. So yeah, really keen.
But also, there's a story Erfan told, and I know you probably aren't privy to it just yet, but Erfan told me a story of how he, as someone that went to international schools in Dubai, he had a very multicultural group of classmates, but not multicultural in the sense that you or I would kind of think about it, where there's a mix of cultures, so much as it is a mix of kind of nationalities. And his classmates are Syrian, right? And so 2017 rolls around, and he and his Syrian mates are watching them miss out on the World Cup in Sydney. And that was like him firsthand telling me that story. It actually just felt like a knife in the heart, because knowing that they had the Civil War going on at the time, it just shows what this means. Like it just shows the volume of football and what it can do, unparalleled to anything else in life, in sport, whatever it be. And so I think, if there's one thing I could leave, it's just remember when we see these results, actually look through some of these rankings and just take a moment to yourself to say, oh my God, Palestine made it, or there are a few thousand people in Oman that, you know, are really, really happy that they might be getting that automatic spot in the next round. Take a moment to actually just reflect on it, because the game touches so many hundreds of millions of people, and they'll be with me throughout this next week, seeing the full tale play out. So again, it's the spark, it's the moment, but it's also the people and the culture that enrich it as well. And that's I think my parting message ahead of what's to come.
Well said, mate. I reckon we should leave it there.
Yeah, all good. RBA, I think again, the RBA Podcast Network. You know where to find us. You know where to find more of our content. And again, just for me personally, it's great to be back. So yeah, enjoy it, and enjoy the game.